All right, can you see the screen, Luis?
Yes, I can see it. Perfect.
All right, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation today. It's very interesting. I'm very proud of presenting today at OISE some of the work that I am very happy to have done in the past couple of years. I am towards the end. I submitted the thesis this week, so the committee will be reading the thesis sooner rather than later, and then hopefully in the next couple of months I will be defending my thesis. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. And yes, today I will be talking about what I did, quote unquote, back home. So why going back home? A lot of people may want to ask. And I don't necessarily see it as going back home, but looking back at the land I grew up and how I can contribute to the ongoing conversations on language teaching. My background is in English language teaching, and I just wanted to provide some insight on what I see from the outside based on my international experiences. So another question that raises is why doing research? And as many people know, as graduate students, we are supposed to engage in research. And as such, research provided me with the tools to understand the micro, meso, and macro layers of how society works and the relationship with education, from policymaking to curriculum development to classroom practices. Research provides nuanced insight of how everything correlates with this approach. I hope to understand other educational practices in different parts of the world, compare and contrast, and provide suggestions for policymaking based on grassroots work with teachers, community members, and of course, different stakeholders. So what is before doing research? I cannot talk about research without telling you guys and sharing with you what's behind that or before that, right? So before engaging in research, for me, it's important to explore and reflect on my own worldview, how I see the world, my philosophy of life. In other words, what do I do every time I wake up in the morning and why I do it? Everything is based on a set of values and value systems. I was brought up as Catholic until I was 12 years old when I did my first communion. And after that, I was away from church looking for meaning in life. And since then, I have not been attracted to any religion, dogma, or doctrine. So I am still in the process of exploring my spirituality and my own value system that is not labeled in any religion. That is why all the work I do stems from my own philosophy of life, an epistemology or cosmology that draws on some indigenous worldviews, different ways of being and ways of knowledge creation in my many relationships with people around the world, and specifically indigenous peoples in Colombia and in Canada. I developed my own system of values. So what is cosmovision? So I am borrowing from different authors, especially from the global south. So this cosmovision is related to the idea of a vision that a social group consists and sustains. This vision is, however, not fixed, and as we see in many human and natural circumstances, it is tested in different times and contexts. And from my ancestors, obviously, my grandmother and my great-grandmother was from an indigenous community in Colombia, the Nazapaes. So imagine that this cosmovision is about establishing forms of seeing, feeling, listening, interpreting, and monitoring the signs of the land, including the perceptions of risks. So that is why for me it's like paying tribute to those before me in the land I was born. And now that I'm a researcher, and for the purposes of my research, I have borrowed two specific concepts that guide me in my research. And these are el buen vivir. So imagine everything you do since the moment you get up in the morning to the very last thing you do before going to bed is guided by how you want your life and others in harmony. So in other words, how you live well in relation to the other. So for some indigenous people in South America, they call it Suma Kausai, Suma Kumaya, Yandareko. You know, there are many different ways of addressing the same issues, but the whole situation here is about how to live well with each other in community. And the second concept is el sentipensante, which refers to a person who's able to find the balance and harmony by tapping into not only the reason, but also the emotions and the feelings. So imagine that I carry these two concepts with me, my work, who I am, and I hope to spark light to others who would like to work on social justice and peace for all. That is why for me it was so important to choose a conceptual framework that is in line with this value system. What kind of research framework I'm looking for? Because my work is in Colombia, it would make sense to use concepts that relate to what happens in the country: social justice, peace building, peace, respecting, understanding others, in search of equanimity and unity, but also in everyday practice, building peace. Once I chose these guiding concepts, I also needed to reflect on what methodology would be the most appropriate to answer my questions, but also how it can help me to be accountable to my participants in respect to my actions. I chose ethnography because ethnographic research designs locate culture at the center of the research inquiry. Creswell describes the ethnographic approach as procedures for describing, analyzing, and interpreting a cultural group's shared pattern of behaviors, beliefs, and language that develops over time. In this process, I was immersed in the day-to-day lives of the cultural group. So this is the group of teachers in relation to their students, and the pedagogical approaches to teach and learn English. Ethnography helped me examine how teachers and students' lived experiences in the English language classroom are connected to broader national and global political forces at play in the Colombian context. Ethnographic approaches emphasize participants' voices placed in the dynamic and meaningful reality of their cultural context. These are especially important in minority or marginalized communities such as Colombia and other countries of the global south. My study demonstrated how ethnographic description shed light on populations that are often ignored or misunderstood by the larger society. Thus, my challenge was to find out how to capture these many voices, accurately represent their context, and describe their experiences. In the end, this revolved around ensuring what I engaged my research participant in the research process, so they were not ignored. Ethnography allowed me to address most of these challenges because it required me to have a close face-to-face interaction between myself and the participants. Now, specifically, I knew I wanted to go beyond the superficial engagement. I needed to be critical of my work and those of others because I was, and I am still interested in the power relations and experiences of the participants. I explore how I can use research to unveil these power relations in relation to education and English teaching, globalization, capitalism, liberalism, etc. And specifically, critical ethnography allowed me to see the bigger picture. I wanted to immerse myself and understand the lived experiences of teachers, students, families, the school, and how all of this is interconnected. I trusted that this group of students and teachers in connection with their school, city, country, and the world is a case study that reflects what typically happens to teachers and students in marginalized conditions. Critical ethnography uses a reflective process to make value-laden judgments and to invoke and call to action for change. Thus, unlike traditional ethnography, critical ethnography and my work as a researcher had an ethical responsibility based on the moral principles of human freedom and well-being, taking into account the conditions of the specific context. But then I was grappling with the idea of being an outsider and an insider. I knew I needed to reflect on who I am and my own positionality. There are two perspectives here. Anemic perspective, as I felt I am a member of the community being studied, but also an ethic perspective as I am an outsider to the community being studied. On the one hand, as an insider, I was born in Colombia in a similar neighborhood of where I conducted the research. I had similar experiences from the students. I faced violence, gang recruiting, police, army brutality, paramilitary, and guerrilla presence. As an outsider, I have lived in North America for more than 20 years in Chicago and Toronto. I am a graduate student with a vast knowledge of what happens in the North. I feel I am an outsider, and I have this vivid comment from one of the teachers in one of our interviews saying, and I quote, "Yecid, you are not Colombian. You are not from here. The way you look, the way you speak, You will go back to your privileged life in Canada, and my students will continue experiencing the violence and poverty. Nothing much will change. And towards the end of my field work, I was actually very happy as the students themselves told me how much impact I have had on their lives. I was an inspiration for them, a role model. And I said to myself, so these are questions that I am still grappling with, and they do not have a crystal clear cut answer, but it's always about how I can contribute to the theorization and empirical knowledge of what happens in different contexts and bring it to the classrooms. What about before, during, and after the research? Well, before the research, I could have set up a project here in Toronto in the district, a school district, or else, or pick up in impoverished country in Central America, or Africa, or Southeast Asia. But I felt it was necessary to pay attention to what has been happening in Colombia, the place where I was born. I felt it made sense to go in these directions at that time. I decided that I had a responsibility with my fellow Colombians. So I have already been working with teachers in Colombia for a long time, and it was not necessarily difficult for me to recruit and connect to the teachers at that time, because it is part of the work that I have always been doing for the past 20 years. So I did not necessarily went to the quote unquote process of recruiting, because it's just continuing the work that I was doing with the teachers in Colombia. So during the process, I realized that I became part of the community, and that was something that I had missed, the ease to blend in and belong. So it was interesting that after 2 or 3 months of being in the field, I was part of the community. I was one teacher more. Everybody would welcome me, even the security guard, the other teachers, the people who clean the classrooms, everything. They knew me as the new teacher. So I was the new teacher, but also I was also belonging to the same community. So now the next question is what's happening after, and a lot of the questions that are happening right now is because I finished the dissertation is done, so what's gonna happen today and moving forward? So I'm still connected to the teachers and the students and working on immigrants and refugees, especially, for example, Venezuelan immigrants to Colombia. So for me, it is not necessarily I went there, I did my research, and then I pull out and I came back to Toronto, and now looking for jobs, for example. For me, it is not like that. It's more about how can I continue the contributions that I have been doing with the teachers in Colombia. So what happens during research? So I will share some of the highlights of my research using photographs as artifact devices to describe the context and experiences. And I will speak to these photographs individually. So this is one of the photographs that I wanted to share with you. The students do activity in the English class. The students do activities to about the Colombian culture, and then the teachers ask them to use English to present what their favorite food is, right? And it is a good way for students to use the English language, English as a foreign language here. And then this was a presentation in which the whole community was invited to come over and listen to the students presenting their favorite food and ask questions in English. And if a person was answered in English, any of the questions related to, let's say, ingredients or where the food is coming from, then they would give them a sample of the food. So as you can see the plates here, so the people would get a sample of the food. And obviously, because I was very well behaved, I responded all the questions, so they gave me a sample of my favorite food, which is potatoes with cream and cheese and sauce. This is another sample that I will play in a second because I was part of the community, and the students felt that I was part of the community. I was included in their activities. So this is an extract of the students after at the end of the school. They do like at the end of the school party. So they invited me to come over and have some pizza and have some drinks. And they invited me. So I thought it was very pertinent to just share with you this clip in which the students are dancing. wanted to share this clip and this other clip as a way to explain the sense of community that you can feel in the community in the school. Since the very moment at the beginning of the day, you can see here in the screen there is a teacher and a coordinator, right? Greeting the teacher, the students, and greeting the parents, and this takes around 20 minutes or so. And since the very moment the students arrive, they are still being welcomed by this, and then they have conversations with the parents who are around about what's happening in Colombia, about politics, about news, etc. So I like this one because every day in the morning, this is what is happening. They have to greet almost every single student by hand and then have a conversation. So for me, this is just another example of how what happens in the English classroom, this sense of community, this sense of building community, does not start in the classroom, but starts since the beginning of the year in the class. Let me show you a couple more photos. And these next couple of photos are related to my data collection moments. You know, as researchers, we use interviews as an instrument. And for me, this is just an example that one of the teachers, when I was going to interview the teachers, she said, I don't have time to do this interview here because the academic day starts at 6 o'clock in the morning and finishes at 12. And in between those 6 hours, they don't have time to sit down and have a conversation for an interview. So she proposed to have the interview outside the school, which I agree. And then she proposed to have the interview at her place with the other teachers as well. And I said, okay, if you're gonna give us your space to conduct the research, then the least thing I can do is to cook. So you can see here the plate that I cooked for them on that day. And then we had a delicious lunch. And then I put the recorder in the middle, and then we started having a conversation. And then obviously I went through the questions, but more in an informal way. And then I did the same thing towards the end of the academic year in the final conversation or focus group with the teachers as well. This time, instead of going to one of the teachers' houses, they proposed that they wanted to go to one of the restaurants in Colombia. And there's the restaurant, this specific restaurant, they chose it because they hired only single mothers from marginalized communities. So they chose this one as a place for us to have a conversation. And you can see that I have the recorder in the middle to have the conversation in the final focus group. And then obviously I use some of the paper that the placemats here to start theorizing on the things that we were having discussion. Other artifacts that I have used and I have seen is how the students have been able to use the English language to use to explore, to talk about their identities as well and who they are. And you can see, and in my experience as well, is how the students use the language to be themselves, right? So here is another one in which the teacher starts the day with a gratitude, and then following up on the video that I showed you that everything starts in the beginning from the school when they greet each other. Then in the class, their teacher always does this gratitude. So it's the students practicing the English language skills since the beginning, because the teacher believes that you have to start the day on a good foot, on the right foot, if you wanna start building peace, right, and work for social justice as well. Other thing happening in the class is the students use their creativity to do different art projects and different assignments, and in which they have to talk about their personalities and their identities, and they use the English language. And I thought this photograph was important for us to share. This one, I love this one because this is towards September the 14th in Colombia. We don't have Valentine's Day. They have the Love and Friendship Day. And then there is no class on that day. I mean, there is class on that day, but on that day, the teacher did was, I want you to cover the whole school with love and friendship. So the student grabbed papers and markers, and they did a lot of hearts and then a lot of messages about the idea of being surrounded by peace, by love, and by friendship. Another piece of a device that I wanted to, or the artifact, I should say, that I wanted to share, like things are not disconnected from reality in Colombia, at least for me. I was not the researchers who go into the classroom, do a 1 hour interview, and then go home and continue living their privileged life. For me, I thought it has to be beyond that. So at that time, there were different rallies and marchers against the Colombian government defunding public education. So I, I went to the streets and I marched with the people because I thought this was important to have this experience as well. And not that it was my first one, definitely. No, I have done this my whole life, even when I was in undergrad in Colombia. But I thought it was important to start making the connections, the global, local connections to what's happening in the school. Why? Because you see the connection here. The students also show the connection and the solidarity, and they did sample marches in the school as well, in solidarity to the marches that were happening outside. And then this happened, this was in the school. And again, the school, there were no classes that day. They were doing just these things in solidarity of what's happening in Colombia. And then this is another photograph that I wanted to share with you. And I think this is the last one because it's my connection with the community as well. So at 6 a.m. in the morning, I got off the bus after a 2-hour bus from the place I was living to the school. Um, and I would sit down here with my coffee and my arepa, which is a typical breakfast in Colombia. And I would sit down here, and the woman here that I promised her to make her famous everywhere I go. So Adriana told me, teacher, I allow you to, to take this photograph, but you want to make sure that I become famous. And I say, I make sure that you're gonna be famous in the planet because of that, because she supports the family. So around 100 people walk by this place every day to get their breakfast, go to school, go to work. And then around that, there are different conversations in this little stall. And then obviously I spent like 20, 30 minutes before they start the class to talk with her and talk to other people. And we talk about politics, we talk about education, we talk about many things that are happening. And also by doing this, I was able to make the connections with the community and with the school and with the city and with the country. So, okay, so let's see. How did your participants collaborated in the research process? So for me, it was really important to work with the students and to work with the teachers as well in the research process. Like I said before, typically when you are a researcher, you go to the field, you collect the data, you come back home, you put all the data on the computer, you analyze it yourself, you put it in vivo, Atlas TI or SPSS, and then after that you continue and then life goes on. For me, I felt like it was important to involve the students somehow. So I call this a participatory protoanalysis of the data. So this photograph describes one of the sessions with all the students in one class in which we talk about all the data that I had collected through videos, through different documents, through different types of media. I shared them with them, and then I told them to start discussing about it and how all of the ideas of social justice and peace connect with different things related to the artifacts that I give them. And I'm gonna show you in a moment how this is gonna look like. So I asked them different questions. What is peace for you? What is social justice for you? Based on the material that I gave them. And then we were having a conversation, and then I was putting all the words, these words in the whiteboard. And then the students who participated, taking some notes, writing in Spanish what their comments were about social justice and peace. Here is another excerpt in which I gave them different type of materials. Here we have material 1, material 2, and material 3, and material 4. I did different groups, and I gave them concepts of social justice, concepts of peace, and I gave them excerpts of the teachers' interviews and excerpts of the students' interviews as well. And then they had to use markers and highlighters to start making connections. And then at the same time, I put this little recorder over here to record what the thoughts are about and start making those connections. All right. So the next is what challenges did I experience? So there are five main challenges that I faced while in the field. So number one, commitment to every day. So Ethnography is not, in my opinion, in my experience, is not something that you do on a short term. I think there has to be some kind of commitment. And that kind of commitment for me, it was getting up every day in the morning at 4 a.m. in the morning, taking a shower and put on the clothes and take a almost 2-hour bus to go to the school, finish at 12 o'clock and going back, and then going back to the place where I was living 2-3 hours after, because the transportation is crazy. And as you can see in this video that I'm trying to show you, this is Transmilenio with the Colombian or Bogota transportation system. So imagine that I had to wait 20 minutes to half hour so I could get on one of these buses. And it's very packed. So that's one of the things. And then for me, it was that commitment of every day to do this for 8 months. And then the second challenge is capturing everything. In qualitative research and in ethnography specifically, we run the risk. There are so many things happening that I ended up taking videos, photos, sounds, interviews, so many things that at some point it becomes daunting and it's too much information that it became like, what should I do with all of this? So then after that, it becomes a huge task of trying to sift through all the materials that I recorded after the 8th month. So I probably encourage other ethnographers to be more mindful of what are the pieces that you want to be collecting. Number 3, the challenges of traumatic stories or trauma. It is real. It is a country which has faced violence and war. And then you see things happening every day in the classroom, bullying and violence in the streets in Colombia in general. So just to give you one example, and this is a triggering warning, I went on a Monday morning, and then all the teachers were sort of worried and talking about, and I asked, what's going on? I say, don't you know, teacher, what happened? I said, what happened? Well, over the weekend, such and such student was killed over a fight or what, or something happened. And then what surprised me the most was that this is so normal that this was not a surprise anymore for anybody in the school or the teacher, because this happened on a regular basis. I'm not saying daily or weekly, but it happens. So this idea of violence and death has become a normal thing in Colombia. And I could expand on that, but I don't necessarily have all the time today. Number 4, another challenge is exhaustion. Definitely, the fact that you have to do this every day for 8 months or 10 months or a year, you get exhausted, not only physically, but also mentally and also emotionally, of listening to all these traumatic stories. When I sit down with the teachers and they tell me all the stories about their students and the parents and single mothers and fathers who do all those sorts of things, at the end of the day, you get exhausted. I needed to take a nap at the end of the day between 3 and 4 p.m. because 5 p.m. when I arrived to the place, because it was too exhausted. And then the challenge number 5 is the idea of constant change. Things change every day, right? So I would assume that the class starts at 6 o'clock and then finishes at 12 o'clock. And in that sort of timing, there are many things happening. Sometimes class is not anymore because the students are doing something else. The students are being sent to another school, or they're having a training for a standardized test. So things change, and everything you plan or everything I plan, I was like, oh, I was hoping to do the interview today with the students. Oh no, well, sorry, you cannot do it today because students are doing other things. So there is always this idea of constant change when it comes with ethnography. So let me go to the next slide. What happens, what are the happy moments that I experienced? Well, in this here, there are many, but I just wanted to highlight 3 of them. So the number 1 is to feel and to understand that the community accepted me for who I am. I was not an outsider. I was always with them. They always welcomed me, even gave me food, always feeling welcome and warm in different classrooms, in the teacher's lounge, in the hallways. The students would always say hi to me. So I think the community acceptance was one of the happiest moments for me. And the second thing is learning experiences. We hear from many people, from other teachers, from other students and the parents, different types of experiences that sort of expands on my ideas of what teaching and learning should be or it is. And then the last but not least is giving and loving. This community is a community of love and give. Everything they do in the class is about why don't we help each other, support each other, despite of the circumstances that are happening, you know, despite of the unemployment, despite of not having health benefits and violence in the streets of the neighborhood. This is always about giving and loving, and that's something that I really liked. So what is my main reflection, right? So there are three things that I thought about as a main reflection of the work that I did here is grappling with the difficulties for me as a researcher, but also as a teacher, but also as an educator, as a human being. This is something that I have to deal with every day, right? Trying to figure out my positionality, who I am with the students and the teachers. Am I becoming a role model, either learning from me, right? And also finding the joy in the little things. Sometimes as a researcher, you know, ethnography, especially going in these places for so long, you may feel, like I said, exhausted, but there are always these little things. When one of the students just gave me a piece of paper and said, Yecid, I would like you to be here. We're gonna miss you. Little things that happen is what make life easier for you as a researcher. And also the last but not least is the acceptance of subjectivity, especially in qualitative research. And in research, I don't believe in this idea of being objective and being unbiased. We need to start accepting in qualitative research that we are subjects, we are individuals, we feel emotions, and we care about others, and we don't necessarily need to mimic the scientific method or the positivist ideas of doing research. So for me, it's accepting that I just cannot be this kind of like rigid researcher. So are there any implications for research and pedagogy? Definitely. So for research, the importance of working with the community and for the community, the needs, take into account their needs, what they want in their terms, but overall to put humanity at the center of both the pedagogical approaches and research. We are not objective anymore, and we are not, and no research should be an object. And pedagogy activities, projects, assignments, etc., that are in line with what the students need, solving the problems that the community face, and providing the necessary skills for employment market, but also critically question what happens in society. So my final thoughts are three different final thoughts based on my comparative international and development experience. From international perspectives, if you are a person who was born and raised in the global north, as a question, you should ask a question. Why do I need to go internationally? Why do I need to go abroad? Why do I need to go to Africa? Why do I need to go to Southeast Asia? Are there not enough issues already locally where you live? Can you address your own bias, your own privileges, and perhaps do research around that? If you want to go back home, why is it that you're doing it, or am I doing it? We need to ask ourselves, how is my research helping others? Or how is it helping my community or the communities that I want to engage? Now, from development perspective, we need to ask and question the concepts of development. Does it mean to go to a country? Am I helping or not in the process of quote unquote to be more developed? And if so, more developed that who or what? The last but not least, from the comparative perspectives, this presentation today is a good example of how we can learn from our peers and how comparing and contrasting research and education can help us both as people, as educational systems, and as societies. So a lot of ethnography work has to do with interpretation of data and dissemination. So I showed you really quick, here is an excerpt that I did on how I connect the data into an artistic collage piece. So this collage piece is the evidence of how the research that I did is portraying humanity at the center. So you can see many pieces here that I don't want to go into much detail, but you can take a moment to have a look about my research, how everything is connected to love, everything is connected to how families are being supported, how different perspectives are being into question, like the idea between us versus them, the poor population and the rich population. Bilingual education in Colombia is only for rich people, right? So many things I tried to caption here. And if you can see on the upper left is the sky, and then the right bottom is sort of this fire, which represents the hell and the heaven, because according to the teachers, they keep saying that the schools is the heaven for them, for the students, because it's a safe space and keep them separated from hell. But I don't want to go into detail of that because that would take me another hour to explain that part. What I would like to leave you today with is with some knowledge that I learned from reading Sean Wilson in his book, Research is Ceremony. If research doesn't change you as a person, then you haven't done right. So I'm gonna stop for now, but if you have any questions and comments, please let me know. This is my information. You can follow me on Twitter because I have Twitter. You can send me an email anytime if you have questions. I have a website, unjusticeforall.ca. I have a podcast as well if you want to follow my podcast. And yeah, so once again, thank you so much for allowing me the space to have this conversation.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Yecid. That was super interesting. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves or type it into the chat, and we can have a discussion.
Hi, Yecid. My name is Ana Kuiper Marquez, and I work at Penn State University. First of all, thank you so much for your talk and for your work. And I also absolutely loved your use of visuals to highlight, the important components of your work in many different formats. I had a few questions, but my first question, and by the way, excuse my baby in the background if you can hear that. You note that you were part of the community, that you felt like you were part of the community. And I think that this is a really it's interesting that you say that, because as you previously noted before you said that, there's this kind of push-pull of emic and edic and part of and disassociated from. And so what I'm curious about is, in your own work, have you thought more or even theorized about what it means to be part of the community and how that might look or feel differently in different geographic spaces, in different linguistic spaces? So what made you feel like you were, quote unquote, part of the community, and how might that be different depending on the context?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for your important question. The good and the bad thing about my research is that I was born and raised in Colombia. Number one, like I said, I also live in a similar neighborhood from my participants, like a very low social class, very impoverished, community as well. So I felt compelled that I wanted to go back to my roots and to the place where I sort of grew up and do something about the things that are happening there. So in a sense, I already felt that I was part of the community, right? Like in general, the Colombian community, the Bogota community, but not necessarily from this specific community. Now, what happens is that because I had been working with the teacher of this specific community for like, I would leave like 8 years now, sort of like that. So the teachers already knew me. And then some of the students already knew me because the teacher would always talk about me, or I would come on a Skype a few times a year to talk about different cultural things, So somehow the students already knew me, and then the teacher would talk to the students about me. So by the time I arrived to conduct my doctoral research, some of the students and some of the teachers already knew me. So there was this expectation that I was coming. Oh my God, you see this coming from Canada again? Oh, I know, he's awesome, blah, blah, blah. And then after the fact, after I arrived and I was there in the flesh, then almost immediately, and then I'm saying this as Colombian, we as Colombian people, we are very friendly and we are always welcoming. So I was not surprised that all the teachers and all the students and everybody staff would welcome me as I was one of them. Even like I said earlier, maybe the security guard, you know, usually nobody enters into this school because it's guarded by dogs and it's guarded by huge walls. Nobody enters at all. But then once I became part of the community, the security guard would just open the door for me and say, "Good morning, teacher, come on in." And then, so it was easier for me. So I felt part of the community, like I said, and throughout the 8 months that I stayed there, they would welcome me in everything that they would do. "Teacher, we're gonna do this. We're gonna have a party. We're gonna have a lunch. We come sit down with us and have lunch." So I became part of the community, and I would say one of the reasons is because they feel me, they see, and they said it many times, they see me as a role model. I was like them at that time. So they see me as I can be like him in 10 years from today. He did it, he made it. It is possible for a poor little guy from an impoverished community in Bogota, Colombia, to go abroad and study a master's and study a PhD and becoming a professor. I can be like him. So I became a role model. So in a sense, there was this idea of hope that I was going around, that we want him because I became a good role model to the point that other teachers asked me, "Can you come to my class and tell us your experience?" And I said, "Yeah, but instead of me going to every single class, the teachers decided to do is to open up the space. There was this hall of like for 200 students. And then I instead of going to 1 or 2, 3 classes, they gathered all together. And that's when I got the chance to actually present my story of life. I don't know if I answered the question.
It did. Thank you. I have another one, but I'll wait to see if someone else does it.
Right. I'm not sure if maybe Luis wanna have. I haven't seen the chat, so I don't know if there are questions on the chat.
There have been no questions that I've seen, Yecid. There was a comment that someone likes your involvement of the participants in your data analysis. Some nice food for thought. Being fully immersed in the school community and travel is admirable. Yeah, feel free.
Right, definitely. And if anybody else, wanna chime in and then ask any other questions, anything that is, you're looking to do some ethnographic work somewhere else, like that would be great to have a comment. So I guess, Anna, you got another chance to ask another question.
Hi, Yecid.
Okay.
This is
Oh,
Jessica. Yeah.
hi.
Hi, Yecid. I'm from Peru, and
Yes.
I kind of like feel like I feel myself in you because I had like similar experience. Well, it's not like the same, but it has kind of the same pattern. So I was wondering, in the place that you did your research, so is there not researchers that they did a similar research than you did in Colombia, specifically in that place that you choose to do your research?
That's a very good question. And I think I didn't say this before, but I hope to answer your question. If I not, you can repeat it again.
Sure.
Here is the thing. In Colombia, this is a public school, right? So in order to do research in a public school in Colombia, you have to ask for permission, and there are many levels of permission that you have to go through, right? So you have to go, you have to present a letter from the school, from the university to the Ministry of Education, and there is like an office, right? And then you have to take the letter, and somebody at some point is gonna take the letter, read and then at some point they can say, yes, come do the research, or they can say, no, don't do the research, right? If they approve you the research, then send the letter to the school principal. And then the school principal is gonna read the letter and say, oh yeah, I agree, please come here, do the research. Or not, or say, I don't need people to come here and do stuff here. And that's how it works. Now, what happened with me, like I said earlier, because I had been working with the community for so long, I skipped those processes. They were not necessarily because, like I said, all the teachers knew me, the students knew me, and even the principal knew me that like I was this guy who was coming on Skype every other week to talk to the teachers and help them with their pedagogical approaches, etc. So I skipped all of those bureaucratic administrative tasks. And then I went right away through the principal, and the principal immediately said, yeah, sure, by all means, you've already been working with us, so why not? You just continue the work. So I think that was an advantage for me compared to, let's say somebody wants to do research in Colombia, and they would have to go through all this process, and that process takes years or maybe years, and sometimes they didn't even reread the letters. So you have to have pretty much know an insider person in the in the field so you can get in. So I don't know if in Peru you may want to ended up with the same situation in which you have to go through all of these steps in order to get access to the public schools, unless you already are an insider and you already been working with teachers and students in one specific school or community.
My question, it was more related because in Peru, the hottest spot is Cusco, or where Machu Picchu is. So usually researchers, they like to go to that place, and that doesn't give you like an, it's just like a bubble, right? That it gives you just one perspective of the whole country. But Peru is not just Cusco. So in terms of Colombia, so my question was more related to if that place that you choose, like there are other researchers, are they conducted a research, or is something new that you are showing with your research?
Right. Yeah. No. I think I was going to. So that being said, so following up on what I was saying, it's so difficult to get that access. So there are no other researchers in the site that I was, or any other public schools. So the only ones that I know that they are conducting research are local universities doing local work, but because there is a relationship between the public schools and the public universities in Colombia, that public universities have the space to conduct research. Now, if somebody from abroad wants to do it, they have to do all of these processes. So you don't see many international researchers. There are not many that I know. I know there are, but there are not many. You have to have good connections with the universities in Colombia to get access to these research sites.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah.
Right.
I do have a second question, if that's okay.
Yes, that's okay.
Okay. Yecid, so you noted that the students use English language to talk about identities, and you said that they use the language to be themselves. And this was interesting to me because I was curious if you felt as though the English language allowed them to be a different part of themselves than the Spanish language, or whether they felt more quote unquote true to themselves in English, or if just the act of multilingualism itself and learning multiple languages gave them more ways to express themselves. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what you meant when you said that they use the language to be themselves.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. That's a very important question. For what I understood, these students, by all means, they are themselves. I mean, they are not inhibited by anything. So what English gave them was like the platform to express some of the aspects that they haven't been able to do in other classes. Let me give you an example. Like, I don't know if you remember one of the shots that there was this sort of drawing, like nice sort of comic style drawing to do English about his style, because the teacher asked him, use anything that you want to do to let us know about who you are. And then this student specifically shared with me a whole book, a sketchbook, in which, oh, finally I get to show my skills as a person who draws. And he showed me all of these drawings, and he chose one of the drawings, and then he started writing in English who he is, with the things that he likes, the music that he likes, the sports, all of those sorts of things. So he felt excited that the English language or the activities that were provided helped him to tap into that those skills that he was not able to show them in other classes, like in mathematics or social sciences, maybe arts, right? But otherwise it was not being possible for him to show all of these skills. And the same thing happened for the other students who play different instruments. For example, the teacher also did sketches, and then the students get the chance to practice like acting skills and sort of like that. So then I remember this student saying, oh, finally I get to be my own YouTuber, or I get to be my own painter or another actress, or sort of like that, something that only could be possible and because the teacher, I know the teacher did different collaborations with the arts teacher or the drama teacher. So they work together in another different project, and then it was only possible like that. And then the students constantly say how the activities they do in the English classroom help them to finally be themselves. So in a sense, open these doors to be who they really want to be, or showcase, right? All of these artistic things, and even making videos on the phone, YouTube style in English, and then share. I have a ton of those ones that they could share, and some others have posted them on TikTok last year, and so on and so forth. So they get to be themselves. Yeah. Did I answer the question? I hope.
You did. I guess my only thing to kind of for you to think about more is whether or not that it was the language that helped them be themselves, or the pedagogies that were being, you know, supported, because it sounds as though those similar pedagogies could easily have been in any language, not just in English. So maybe to further think about, you know, if there was something specific that English promoted that allowed them to be themselves, or more that if it was, you know, the practices being used in the classroom that happened to be in an English classroom that were really the things that were kind of helping them. So that's something you can also think further about.
No, definitely. Thank you for asking that question. I think you're right. I think, and you're not the only one who has asked me this question about, oh, well, I can do the same activities. I can do them in Spanish, and then they feel excited. Yes, definitely. But the thing here is that the students get to do those activities in another language. So they feel, when they told me, like when they use TikTok, they see, oh yeah, because I want somebody in another country to see what I do, so they understand me and they know that I'm an artist or that I'm a YouTuber. You know, that's the extra thing. Like, you know, even the ethics teacher, sorry, not the ethics, the drama teacher, he says, yeah, they do the same activities in Spanish, and then the students do similar. But the extra point is this idea that somebody outside Colombia will get the chance to see them, and then they get to know other people from around the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why they felt more excited, because I remember the teacher saying, hey, do this, because why did we send this? We just see it, and, you know, Canadians can get to see it, or the United States, or in Europe, or maybe in China, you know, they want to see things that you're doing. And then the students were excited because it was in English. But thank you for that question, because I need to keep that in mind as well.
Perfect. Yes, Steve, there's a comment in the chat box that maybe you can speak to before we say goodbye.
All right, so let me read it. The question hasn't formed yet, but I'm still thinking through. And with that video you share with us, the students entering the class, I think I'm thinking a little bit about the impulses that lead you to your creative practice. Again, the question has informed by the rendering of what kind of ethnography was really striking. Thank you very much for offering to think about. Yeah, for me, like I said in the beginning, ethnography means to me understanding those lived experiences, understanding where the students are coming from, the teachers are coming from, where is all of this, the things that are happening behind the curtains. Because like I said in the beginning, when you do qualitative research, let's say a study, or a lot of people go into the classroom and sit down and ask a few questions to students, and then they go home. So a lot of researchers only analyze the data based on what is given in that specific moment, in that survey or in that interview. But this ethnographic approach, right? What I had the chance to do is to see the bigger picture, that is not only one little thing that is the answer to the questions, but there are things that are happening beyond that since the beginning they enter in the classroom or in the school, right? And even the connections with the reality in Colombia, you know, the protests and the march and the rallies, all of those things are connected, and those things touch the students. And then I wouldn't have been able to see this unless I have done this ethnography, because I got a chance to go into the streets and accompany the students let's do these internal marches in the schools and ask them questions. How do you see these connected to the streets and connected to the Colombian government, etc. And I could trace this pattern from the streets to the city, to the school, to the classroom, and to even to how they see themselves in the future. So Wallace, I hope I have somehow answered your question.
Thank you, Yecid. There's one last question. Do you feel comfortable answering that one?
Yeah. In your analysis, have you considered the impact or influence of social media, television, and the internet on children's images of themselves, their goals, or potentials? Yes, yes. We had a discussion with one of the teachers because she's sort of opposed to social media and sort of opposed to TikTok and all of those sorts of things because of the images that they represent. And then she tried to explain to the students that that's not a reality. That, I mean, that's a reality, but they should focus on something different, like humanity and caring and community and all of those sorts of things. So she does a lot of activities for the students to use social media, but in more like a social justice oriented way. Like, for example, they did a video about unemployment and garbage in the streets of in the neighborhood, and then they shared this video on social media, both YouTube and TikTok. And then the teacher said, see, you can do this thing instead of posting selfies and fashion and how should I wear the skirts or the leggings and makeup and stuff like that. You can do things that are more compelling for society, like I said, like drug addiction or even stray dogs, for example, homelessness, things like that. And they take videos of these and then they themselves put them on social media. And some of them use English because there's this idea, like I said earlier, like if they post these videos on Facebook or YouTube or TikTok, somebody in the North will see them and they you know, so create some kind of social awareness internationally. That's why they like to use English.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yecid. We are wrapping up, but I see one final comment.
Yes, Alexandra, I did that collage on purpose because I know in the future, I hope to write a book based on that. And I hope that that picture would be the cover page of my book at some point in the future. Let me see.
Excellent. Yecid, thank you so much. I think we'll wrap it up here. Just it's a little past 1, but it's been a pleasure to have you here speaking about your work. It's been super interesting and instructional for myself, and I'm sure for others. And I just want to thank you again, and thank you to everyone who has come to engage in the discussion. And I just wanted to note that the student speaker series will be continuing next semester. So please stay tuned for your emails to find the invites and the information about that.
All right. Once again, thank you so much, Luis, for this opportunity. And thank you, everybody, for coming today. I hope you have enjoyed and then have been inspired to do some little ethnographic work out there. Have a good rest of the day.
Have a wonderful